Welcome from Sananda. A city of light is you in a number of ways. You yourself experience yourself by and large as a complete unit, a unitary being. But of course you also recognize that at least at the physical level you're made up of actually many beings. The microorganisms in your gut, for example, and so on. And so in that sense, as an individual human, you're also a community. You're a being of light living in community with all of the physical elements that make up your body, both in the sense of chemical elements and elements in the way that I've suggested, other kinds of organism who are joining in, participating, who have their own consciousness and all are contributing to your experience of being human. So you can consider yourself as in yourself, as a being of light, using your light to organize matter and to align with other consciousnesses for the benefit of all, as being of yourself a city of light. But more generally, the term is one that we would use, though this first definition is important because it feeds into some of the things that I will be saying about this second and main definition of a city of light. So this main definition then is that a city of light is a community in the same way that a physical city is a community. It doesn't have physical structure beyond the fact that you are living as physical beings and in community with one another, being a city of light in the ways that I will describe. Then, yep, there's a physical manifestation to that city of light, but really, essentially, it's just you who are the physical beings involved. The structures of the city are your relationships, and your relationships are relationships of light to whatever degree you choose. There are skills involved in this choosing, and I will talk about those later. But let's begin with this simple notion. You're beings of light in human form. Your light is not hermetically sealed. You may experience yourself as being distinct from each other at the physical level, but energetically speaking, if we look at your light is continuously in interaction with the light of others. Indeed, ultimately with the light of all that is, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. So for you at this time, the creation of a city of light is very much about growing more aware of the light that you are and the way in which your light interacts with others, and through that awareness developing skills that enable you to be in a conscious relationship with your light, not enforcing a dominant will upon it, but learning how to interact with its own consciousness, because light is conscious, in ways that are life-enhancing for all involved. Let's pick up on life as consciousness. So you could consider in your universe, your world, then the primary manifestation of consciousness is light. It's the first stage. Now, when you move within and explore consciousness and explore your own consciousness or the larger sense of there being a sea of consciousness of which you are part, that experience is not necessarily one of light. So that you can experience consciousness in a sense prior to its manifestation as light. But if we look at the physical world, then consciousness has as its primary manifesting form light. And that light, the physical light, the light that comes from the sun and the stars and so on, is not ultimately separate from the light that I refer to when I describe you, for example, as a being of light. It's the same light. You're just sensing it in a different way. In a way, we could use the analogy of the visible portion of the electromagnetic spectrum of all that light is. So you know now, you've learned over the last few centuries, that there are forms of light, ultraviolet, for example, or infrared, that your eyes don't immediately sense. You may find that as you evolve, you're sensing more of that electromagnetic spectrum, but you know there's a whole lot of that spectrum that exists and you're not directly picking up on. You pick up on other sections of that spectrum in different ways, radio waves, for example. But for you as physical beings, there is this fairly limited section of the electromagnetic spectrum that is yours to have direct experience of. And for most of you, that direct experience is of great beauty. So we could use that as an analogy for saying that if we're talking about what we could consider part of the same spectrum, but much, 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 much higher frequency, that here too, you have your own way of sensing those subtle energies, those subtle frequency patterns that form part of this continuum of an electromagnetic spectrum. So there is this second area of sensing, intuition, inner knowing, seeing with your third eye rather than with your physical eyes, and so on. There are many, many ways in which you can tune in to these more subtle frequencies of light. And indeed, ultimately, each of you does it in your own unique way, though, of course, there can be a lot of overlap between individual manners of sensing these subtle energies. So that when we speak of you growing in consciousness, becoming more aware of all that light is, we could use that analogy as being a little bit like developing your physical sight in order to be able to see in the ultraviolet or the infrared range. It's akin to that. And this is a time in which there are qualities of energy entering your world that are facilitating, indeed speeding up, accelerating this process of opening awareness. And in large measure, a primary reason for all of you listening to these words or reading a transcript of them in being here on Earth at this time is to take advantage of this potential for accelerating growth. So there's a lot of help for you. So let's return to you becoming more aware of the light that you are and the light that is behind all physical manifestations. In one way, you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, as the saying goes. That's to say, it is through your endeavors that you develop awareness. But, of course, there's a huge amount of help for you. Many beings come to your assistance when you show that willingness to grow. And so that even as we speak, or even if you're reading these words on a page or on a screen, give yourself permission now to tune in to the energy behind the words. This can be experienced as part of the help that I'm talking about. Here am I, a consciousness of light, loving to assist human consciousness to develop wherever I can. And so ride on that. Hitch your wagon to that assistance. And it doesn't matter, by the way, if you feel that you're successful in this or not very successful. Willingness is all. Willingness is an expression of intention. And the intention is to open to more of the light that you are. So let's come back to you as a being of light. Why would you choose to know more of your light? It's very simple. Your light is extremely beautiful. You have, in a manner, been hiding your beauty from yourselves. And whilst there has been usefulness in that, learning has occurred. At the same time, times change. You're moving into new moments of experience. And you don't need to learn in the same ways that you did. So there was a great focus upon learning through lack. That might be physical lack, but it was also in large measure a lack of consciousness. What happens if you close down huge swathes of your own consciousness? What happens? What's it like? Can you learn? If so, what do you learn? And you've been doing that for many centuries. And it's not been without value. You have grown, each of you individually and collectively as humanity. A great deal has been learnt through this, more than you realize at this time. It'll be easier to see after this epoch is finished or after this lifetime is finished. But just because you've learnt a lot from one mode of learning doesn't mean that you're stuck with that indefinitely. And this is the time when you move to new modes of learning. And so that tendency to cut yourself off from large swathes of your own light, of your own consciousness, is tapering off. It's coming to an end. You're learning not to do that anymore. And therefore you begin to access more of this limitless beauty of your own being. And as you do so, you also find that you're releasing one of the characteristics of this learning through subtraction, this learning through limitation, that you begin to realize you don't really need to experience yourself as an isolated unit, that you are, as consciousness, part of the consciousness of humanity, the consciousness of all life on earth, the consciousness beyond the earth, and so on. You're part of the sea of consciousness, whose primary expression in this reality I've suggested is light. So you come to know yourself not just as a being of light, but actually ultimately you begin to realize that you are all light. And one of the most valuable, most familiar, if we speak in terms of galactic or even universal terms, ways of doing that, the mode or state or space that supports that realization that you are all light, is what we call the city of light. So this is you living in relationship with each other, knowing not just that you are a being of light, but everyone else is as well, and that your light is contiguous, it's continuous, it's connected, it's interactive. And those interactions can grow more and more beautiful as you grow more skilled in observing them, in mastering the way in which you can ride flows of light and create with light. So light has its own consciousness, but it is very willing to enter into co-creation with you. And that's another way of understanding what a city of light is. It's a co-creation. It's you as human consciousness and human consciousnesses and all of humanity as a consciousness interacting with the consciousness of light. And what are you doing? Well, different ways of expressing this. Partly what you're doing is just creating more and more beautiful experiences of being in relationship with yourself, because you also are that city of light, as I mentioned earlier, and with each other. And there is a name that we use for this increasing realization of the totality of the beauty of all that is. And the name we use is divine presence. So here's another element or another way of understanding what we're talking about. You have a divine self. You are a divine being. As a divine self, you exist beyond time, beyond space, beyond this kind of reality at all. So that at the intellectual level, it can be quite difficult for you to understand what your divine self could possibly be. It doesn't act, it doesn't change, it doesn't think. What is it? And yet, if you let go of the intellectual attempt to understand what divine presence is, and if you just go within, and I suggest that you might like to do this right now, that if you go into your heart center, and just for a few moments, be quiet there, and sense or imagine that right at the heart of your heart there's a light. Many ways of experiencing this light. It might be like a flame, crystal, a doorway of light. Whatever it is for you, let yourself go through that light into the beyond. And when you do that, even if only a little, you're beginning to connect with consciously your divine self. I emphasize consciously because you are, of course, connected with your divine self all the time. You are your divine self. You're a manifestation of that divine self. So that then, when within the environment of a city of light, you're seeing each other as light, as beings of light, what you're seeing in the heart of that light, what is the meaning of that light? It is that you are observing in each one a divine being, and in yourself as well. And as you allow more and more the divine being that you are to be in relationship with the divine being of all others, so a particular kind of energy is generated, a little bit like the way in which an electrical current in relationship with a magnetic field will itself generate light. Then what you find is that through that connection, through that interaction, you begin to find that you are not experiencing the divine within, but that you are living within the divine, and not alone, that all of you that are that city of light are living within the presence of the divine. That then opens up a wholly new stage of your existence that at the moment you can glimpse, of course, because you can have the kind of experiences I'm talking about. But to fully embody them, that's what you're engaged in at the moment, within the compass of this lifetime and perhaps beyond. It doesn't matter how long it takes. Time, after all, ultimately is just an invention that you've used as one of the forms of limiting consciousness, and that you're in the process of letting go. So you're moving by degrees much more into the eternal now that is real for you at higher dimensions of your own being. And doing so, therefore, you begin to lose the sense of, I must achieve enlightenment by 6 o'clock, or next year, or 1,000 years from now, or whatever your timescale might be. It just doesn't have relevance anymore. You're in process, we might say, and that's what matters, that you are life becoming more alive. So this is another way of understanding, very simply, what a city of light is. It's an environment for helping life to become more alive. And crucially, it's an environment in which all of you participating are helping yourselves and each other to become more alive. So it's that magic of the connections you make. And that's really important, because as you come to appreciate the light that you are, and as you allow your awareness to include more and more of that light as an experience of you, you have to, for your own comfort as much as anything, change your understanding of what is you. And if you attempt to hold the old idea of you being a particular size and shape, a kind of container for life, if you attempt to continue that as you come to know yourself as light more and more, you begin to run into difficulties. Essentially, you're trying to squeeze a very large amount of light into a small space. And analogous with compressing gas, you get a build-up of temperature. In other words, you just become a little bit too intensely busy in terms of your own experience of your own energy for any kind of comfort. And so allowing a different sense of self, a sense that is much more connected, a much more of a sense of, yes, I am a drop of consciousness in the ocean of consciousness, and so are you, then you're giving yourself that space. And it's not just space to expand, it's space to interact. And so we come back to another primary function of a city of light, which is co-creation. The city of light itself is a co-creation. It's you coming together and pooling the resources of your light, if you like, to create with light. I'll talk some more shortly about that. But you are, as you do this, you are allowing, in this process of co-creation, you're allowing yourself, your consciousness, to open up new dimensions of experience, new possibilities for creation, so that in a certain kind of way you can look upon yourself as a star in the making. To some extent you can regard that as a metaphor, but you can also take it as a literal truth. What is the origin of stars? Well, you have some understanding of what the origin is at the physical level, but there is consciousness there, an immense consciousness within the vast majority of stars. And that consciousness has traveled many paths, for each star has its own path. They bring unique qualities into the world. But one of those paths is way, way back, some other place, some other time, some other dimension, individuals not at all unlike you, evolving that light until the only sane form for that light, because there's so much of it, if you choose to be still in the physical world, is to be a star. And then you grant light to thousands upon thousands of millions of life forms, and you're engaging in this wonderful, limitless process of creation. But well before that, you, as part of, for an example, the process of developing a city of light, learn to connect with other cities of light. For this is a very standard form, as I've mentioned already, on the evolutionary path of beings like yourselves. To exist in cities of light is profoundly joyful and offers wonderful opportunities. But now a little bit about the actual building of a city of light. What do you do? To some extent it happens naturally. When you choose to grow, your light becomes more apparent, there is more of it available, it interacts with the light of others who are on a similar journey, and that interaction is at least potentially forming a city of light. But then there are multiple skills that you can employ. As you study your own light and the light of the universe around you, and just light itself, no definitions, no limitations, just whatever you sense light to be, you discover it has its own consciousness, that it interacts with you, that you interact with it, and there is, let's say, simply a playfulness available to you. And you discover that the light that you're playing with interacts with the experience you have of the outer world. This is not just something that you play with when you go into meditation, that has nothing to do with the life you're living day by day in the outer world. Far from it. It's the way in which you build the experience of life. And for most of the time in your lives up till now, a lot of this has been unconscious. It's been outside of the realms of what you can be aware. Doesn't mean you haven't been involved, you have. So here's another way of understanding what these skills are. It's you becoming aware of what you're already doing. But in doing so, you change what you're doing. You become more skilled, you become more joyful in it, you become more playful, you become more inventive. There is no limit. And especially what you're doing when you create a city of light is creating forms of light that are honoring of all life, honoring of those who choose to share in the process of creation, but absolutely not limited to them. So it's an honoring of all life. It is opening spaces and to some extent holding spaces, not in a fixed way, but in a fluid way that consciousness allows, holding spaces that are welcoming, that are not exclusive, that, if we speak of a city, that do not have a city wall, do not have city gates, do not have ramparts that are manned by soldiers, guards. No, that's not what a city of light is. So a city of light can be a focus of light, a concentration of light, a locus to which you are drawn, but is not closed off. If there is a sense of being excluded from cities of light, it is simply that there's still a processing underway whereby you learn enough of your own frequency patterns to be able to align them with those of a city of light. And then you find yourself within that reality and consciously co-creating it. I've mentioned that when you create a city of light, one of the outcomes is that you find that there are many other cities of light and the beings there are delighted to help you. But there are also many beings of light who have as a primary interest assisting those who are at the level of consciousness you are currently to shift to the next level. To some extent, dimensions, realities, levels of consciousness come in distinct bandwidths. There's a continuum, but there can be an undoubted sense of shifting from one state of consciousness to another. And so you are in the process of leaving one state of consciousness, overall, whatever time it takes, as I've said, into another state of consciousness. And there are very many beings of light, of course, beings with immense skill, beings with a huge amount to share, who love to assist this moving across the borderline between one state of consciousness into the next level of consciousness. That is you essentially living within a city of light. Now that suggests that these are very distinct from each other, that you cannot, in a sense, continue to live in this reality of the outer world as you know it currently, and at the same time be in a city of light. No, not at all. There's an overlap, and that overlap is very valuable. So part of what we're teaching at the moment, really in all that we're teaching, is teaching you how to coexist comfortably in this physical outer world, this busy world of yours, this complex world, and at the same time know that you are living in a world of harmony, of light, of course, of joy, of mutual assistance, mutual support, witnessing the divine in each other, and so on. And there is value in doing that. You can look at the world around you and see a lot of difficulties. We could take an obvious example here, just to close with. Around you in the world you can see wars being fought out. Wars are expensive. They cost a lot of money, and that money costs a lot of human energy. So quite apart from the deaths and the mayhem that is caused, which matter, no death finishes the story of the being who is being killed. But even leaving that to one side, the sheer expense of running a war is so foolish. That money can be used so much more effectively to create peace, to create harmony, to create the kind of environment that supports the creation of a city of light. And so when you hold in your consciousness those energies, however nascent, however undeveloped as yet, of a city of light, you're also offering that to all of humanity. Many can be so caught up in their own pain that they're just not able to register those frequencies at the moment. So be it. That's the way it goes sometimes. Don't let that detract you from holding those frequencies in your consciousness. Because the more that you do, without putting any pressure on you, but the more you do, the easier it becomes for everyone to find those frequencies and to recognize that there are more effective ways of creating the world that everybody wishes for, that you do not need to see the other as other, that you can come to know that you are all one, and that you can assist each other on that journey. So people continue in whatever way they need to. We can wish them love, we can bless them. But in the meantime, as you wish, if you wish, let yourself know that you are creating a city of light that helps all to come to peace within themselves as individuals, and then in coming to peace with themselves as individuals, to come to peace with each other. War dissolves when war within ceases. That's where you make the peace. And so this is another function of creating with light, creating a city of light. It helps you within yourself to create peace. You come to appreciate that every portion of your being, coming back, for example, and just as an example, to those microorganisms, the bacteria in your gut, they're beautiful beings too. The strands that make up your personality self, the different traits that you've inherited, that you're learning to make peace with, these have their own kind of reality, their own kind of existence, quasi-independent. And the more that you continue to make peace with all these different facets of your being, expressing gratitude for all of those experiences, moving back from condemning yourself or condemning anyone else, and just seeing life as something wonderful that's unfolding, and that you are part of that unfolding. So though I've spoken of those who wage war as being foolish, do not use my words as an opportunity to criticize or judge. Who hasn't been a fool at one time or another? Think of times when you've made foolish decisions and loved the person you were then. And that will help you to keep those doors of the city open, to knock down the walls so that all are welcome. Thank you for listening. Goodbye for now.